Welcome to our Climate Gap Quick Cuts series, highlighting the leaders tackling climate's biggest challenges in tech, talent, product, and investments in a format made for busy listeners. Short episodes, sharp insights, no filler. Let's get into it. Forget slick boardroom decks. Real change in smart buildings happens underground, in boiler rooms and wiring closets, not corner offices. Today on Climate Gap Quick Cuts, we sit down with Saheel Chandrani, CEO of PingCx, who insists you can't launch a product in a building unless the incumbent engineers are on your team, because people, not platforms, power performance. Stay with us to learn why GTM starts in the basement and how that mindset flips the game for providers and building operators alike. All right, so Saheel, welcome to the show. Could you kick us off with a quick introduction to your background, how you went from climate tech newcomer to building ops evangelist at PingCx?
No, I'd be happy to. I appreciate the opportunity. The industry has been one that I've been very close with. So I started out as an intern while I was in college at a large manufacturer's office here in northern New Jersey. Interned there for about a year. Been there, was there full time for a while. So coming up on 20 years in the industry. I'd say the last 4 have been very, my proximity to, let's call it the independent service provider channel has been relatively recent, 4 or 5 years now. And I think just being that close to arguably the people that do most of the work in the industry, getting to see some of their challenges, some of their pain points, some of their successes, that has really converted me into somebody that wants to not only build a product but build tools and a community around the people that actually get the work done in a building.
And so that's led you to PingCx. What are you doing there?
So PingCx is a let's call it a smart or automated commissioning platform for building automation systems. So essentially a lot of the workflow that's necessary when you are either building, constructing, handing over a building, or operating a building throughout its life cycle, the platform automates a lot of your, tedious manual functional testing and quality checking process that you would normally do by hand. We have figured out ways to automate that entire process.
Well, today we wanted to talk about why GTM starts in the basement. And I'd like to talk about why you insist on an incumbent operator on board. So when we've talked before, you've told me you've drawn a hard line. PingCx won't deploy in a building without an incumbent operator on the team. Tell us what's behind that rule and why have you made that a non-negotiable?
It's really, really important for us to make sure that we've got the right team present at the right times of the deployment. So I'll start by saying 2 sort of main things. One, the incumbent team, and in this case, I'm thinking more of the building engineers, the chief engineers, right, the guys in the basement doing the work. There is a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge that we just, as a newcomer to the building, or a new vendor on site with that owner perhaps, there is just a tremendous amount of learning that we get to skip if we've included the people that are most familiar with that building, if we're including them in that project. So that's probably the number one reason why we say that we want those people on the team. The second's probably, and this is especially true for us, is we feel like we'll do a good job of uncovering a lot of what needs action in a building, right? A lot of our peers will do a good job of finding root causes of concerns in a building if we are not including the team that will ultimately be responsible for resolving those issues. We've only really done half the work. Yeah. And I think that when we spend the time to include the right people in discovering what's wrong, learning from them on, you might think that's wrong, but that's kind of correct and that's actually working for us. If we are taking all of that insight and intellect into account, we are then putting the right information and not junk information in their hands, because they'll ultimately be the guys going to go fix it. So having the right team early is pretty important for us at the forefront of a project.
I feel like that is a approach that makes a lot of sense, but I don't know if it's one used often. Let's explore the upside of starting with engineers and ops then. Most startups, I feel, chase CIOs or VPs of real estate, traditional model. You flip, and you've flipped the script, courting engineers and ops staff, as you say. What do you gain, and what do founders risk by reversing the usual GTM hierarchy?
I'll start by saying that the risk is truly in delaying success out of a project. Look, I should also say that everybody plays a role in a successful deployment. But a risk really is that once you've done the hard work of selling a solution to a buyer, if you are ultimately going to hit a roadblock from those that will get it done, you have spent a lot of time in your sales process without truly making sure that, do I have the right ingredients for success? Two, I'll say that, what we do and what others like us do is put the right tools in the hands of the people in the building. And so we like to start with the engineering staff, the building staff, the sustainability teams, the management staff, entirely because we feel that ultimately putting the right tools in the hands of those that will do the work, getting their buy-in early, only makes that when we go in front of the decision makers ultimately at the end, we've done our homework, that we understand the building, we understand the risk, we understand the upside, and that the package that we've put in front of the decision maker is a well thought out, well understood package that their team has already bought into. That they have, from a decision maker's point of view, they don't have to do the work of convincing their team that this is a good idea. Their team is excited about the good idea.
Yeah, there's always a problem with adoption where great ideas just kind of settle sometimes. So
Sure.
I really like that approach, and I'm sure it's one that makes a lot of sense and can really turn the tide. Moving on, thinking about founders, I think sometimes they often underestimate the pushback, as you've described it, from tired, overworked, potentially ops teams. What's been the toughest lesson you've learned about winning buy-in at that ground level?
When I show up to work every day, I am most excited about what I do. When I show up to a building engineer's office, I might be the most excited about what I do. I am not the top of their priority list. They genuinely have really important things going on every day, where every hour of their time that we take is an hour they could have spent somewhere else. So some pushback or some hesitation or skepticism even is are our solutions really capable of what you're suggesting that they are? Is there really an upside here? And financially, we may spend $1,000 somewhere where we didn't see something back, and people move on. But what really burns is when we've spent a lot of time behind something at the expense of something else. And so some skepticism, we typically see that as some pushback. And two, there is this, people don't often say it out loud, but you can just sense that it's there, that when we go looking or digging inside systems for problems, the intent isn't to point fingers or to play the blame game or, say that this is operating this way because somebody did something. I know I would be a little skeptical of, being, inquisitive systems, looking through sort of how I run things. And I think when we explain sort of what the mechanism for doing what we do or what do the fixes look like, I think it becomes very clear that this is in fact a significant improvement opportunity in a building and not an exercise to find blame or assign blame. And I think that once we've spent the time to really educate and explain sort of the process and the outcome and what they get at the end, why it might be important, we tend to overcome some of this objection, some of this pushback. But the easy way, or what people say out loud, of course, is time and priorities, and what sort of not said but felt is certainly some skepticism and some cover your type reaction.
When we spoke, you've talked about coalition building, not just logos on a slide, but I get a real sense for you it's about real partnerships. So we understand what you've described as your approach, but what does that look like in practice, say during a week-long site rollout?
I'll say that generally for us, it's the team that's in the building, it's the team that shows up to the building. And we think that we're part of that team that shows up to the building. But there are so many other stakeholders that might not be in that building every day that play a significant role in that building. Think design consultants, MEP type folks, think sustainability folks that might have a responsibility over several buildings. That if we don't spend the time early on with each of these different groups that have some significant influence in the success or failure of our deployment, we are not stacking the deck in our favor. And so what we do, which again consumes time, consumes effort, but is so worth it, is spending time one-on-one with each of these different stakeholders, right? From, again, Sales 101, what's a win for everybody involved? So that ultimately they may not get $1 out of the deal, they may not enjoy some of the energy benefit, but there is some benefit to just about everybody involved here. And really spending the time to say, well, we are going to protect your interest, but also expand your interest in a specific project. Identifying those wins for everybody early on, getting everybody lined up is so important for us that when we finally show up to a building, and ultimately when we show up, there's a very finite scope or a finite amount of time that we're in that building. It really is in our benefit that everything goes smoothly when we're there.
Yeah.
And to maximize our odds or maximize our chances of success when we're there, we've met with everybody who's involved in the building. We've extracted as much institutional knowledge. Everybody knows what their role is when we're there on site. We have felt that building a strong coalition or a strong team early on really pays dividends, all the way through deployment, all the way through extracting, results out of a building, implementing those results. It just becomes a much more collaborative effort than this is what I'm doing in your building type approach.
Do you spend a disproportionate amount of time with that approach, do you find?
Historically, yes. And, if I'm looking at other roles I've had in the past, it's easy to discount the impact it has. And therefore, you sort of skip over some of the steps and you deal with the pain on the back end. So historically, if I were to look at what has been done in the industry in the past, this is certainly a disproportionate amount of time on the front end of a project. At the end of the day, do we spend more time in both scenarios? Probably not. It probably is the same amount of time, if not less friction this way. But on the early end of a project, before we've really been able to bill any time, we're certainly spending a lot more time with this approach.
I think I know the answer to this, but what's the feedback from the engineers and the ops team? Is this an approach that is welcome?
I would say so. The overwhelming feedback has been people feel involved from day one. People feel bought in from day one. Nobody is surprised at what's going on, when you show up to a building. That this approach tends to win a lot more supporters for a project. That, God forbid, even if we had less than ideal results, because it was just a smooth process, we tend to have a lot of goodwill with that team. So I would say that the investments that we make are certainly well received.
Finally, if you could mandate a single required reading for every climate tech VC, what would it be and why?
I certainly could think of a couple of books, maybe even trade publications. I still strongly feel that where I had noticed myself lose touch a little with the industry was in spending time with a lot of the trades folks. And so what I would say is, rather than recommend a book, I might suggest that Climate Tech VC or anybody that has an interest really in the industry in your building or in a client's building, get an introduction to the chief engineer, the building staff, grab a cup of coffee and go downstairs and ask if you could spend 15 minutes with them. I think in that 15 minutes, what you might uncover about what their day-to-day life is like, what their challenges are, what their successes have been, is very likely insightful in a way that perhaps traditional media may not be able to give you an answer.
That's brought us to the end. Thank you ever so much for sharing your insights, and I really quite enjoy the human approach that you have adopted at PingCx, and understanding that the biggest impact will always be with the people that are working with these tools. And whilst it's an obvious approach, It's not one that is adopted throughout, and so I think that's a refreshing thing that certainly the engineers, as you describe, are feeling the benefit to and listen to. So thank you very much for your time and sharing those insights.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Ben.
Thanks again to Saheel Chandrani from PingCx. I really liked his approach that GTM in smart buildings isn't a C-suite sprint. It's a multi-year relay in the basement. Some really good insights. Invite your operators in, lean into their expertise and watch adoption take off. If you're a founder, start with the people who touch the pipes and the wires. If you're an owner, demand that any new platform include hands-on support for your frontline teams. Thanks for tuning in. Short episodes, sharp insights, no filler. Catch you next time.